Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Helena Hiilivirta, the chairperson of the Finnish Cultural Foundation and the regional Pirkanmaa Foundation. I'm happy to welcome you all this final event of the Freedom of Speech happening in Tampere 2025. This event is organized together with our collaborators, the CV Åkerlund Media Foundation, the Foundation of the Promotion of Journalistic Culture in Finland, Reporters Without Borders, the Journalism Program at the University of Tampere, the Pan-European Institute of the University of Turku, the Finlayson District, and Lännen Media. And I would like to remind that this event is streamed and photographed, and if someone doesn't want to be seen, so please go back there. And I'm sure we have a very interesting morning together with our panelists, and now I want to give floor to our ideator and initiator, chief editor of Lännen Media, Matti, and he will continue working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena Hiilivirta, and thank you for the Cultural Foundation Pirkanmaa Regional Fund for making all this possible. My name is Matti, and I'm very happy to be the host for this panel today. We have expertise on the US, the world, I would say, even from China, across Finnish media, and we have a very, very timely topic. And I hope you can all chime in later on. We'll have time for some Q&A, so please prepare your sharp questions for the panelists when you listen to what they have to say. Freedom of speech is a core value. It is at the heart of every democratic society and a vital part of any free person's day-to-day life. It is also top of news agenda in the United States of America today, this week, this year, and I would dare to say for 3 more years at least to come. Free speech. And as we know, freedom is not free. Freedom has a price. Freedom is becoming also transactional. Freedom for me, but not for thee, said our keynote speaker, Kathleen Carroll, yesterday, talking about the second president of the United States, who in his time made the mistake of trying to prohibit journalists from criticizing himself, the president. It didn't go down very well. And now, did you hear what Trump just said yesterday? Did you hear what he said last night? Did you hear what he said in the UN? After the UN, that he turned around in the question of Ukraine and Russia, and so on and so forth. So we are discussing what the president said, not maybe as much what the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal wrote about it. Did you hear that Jimmy Kimmel's late night show was taken off the air? But did you also hear that he's already back on? And he came back with flying colors, very humble, very, very well liked by his audience, saying that, let me begin by continuing where I was before I was interrupted. So there are interruptions in democracy, interruptions in the freedom of speech, but the United States in many ways is a place that we have always looked to for inspiration, for best practices, also in Finnish journalism. So there's a lot to talk about, and let me introduce our panel, and also very warm welcome to the viewers who are watching this stream, either live or on the Cultural Foundation premises later on. And let me begin by, or let's go in the order how you sit. Okay, so my question to all of you will be, the same what our keynote speaker Kathleen Carroll asked yesterday in the end of our Tampereen Raatihuone discussion. What are you most worried about? So please, in your view, what is happening in the United States? And secondly, what are you most worried about? And here we have the editor-in-chief of Uusi Juttu, the Finnish media startup, the new story or the new thing, docent of journalism and a long-time media entrepreneur, I would say, and researcher Olli Seuri.
Thank you, Matti. And it's good to start because I would say that I tend to lean to optimism. My worries are maybe global or broader in perspective than what is happening right now in the US. Of course, the rise of autocracy, the situation in Ukraine, Gaza, and so on. But I would say there's always a kind of silver lining. When the rise of autocracy started about 2 decades ago, we started on a good level. There are limits to power. There are still institutions working also in the US. So I would like to highlight one worry, and that for me is kind of a. I'm sorry, I start so academic. I hope someone else is more straightforward. But it's epistemological divide. So the degradation of shared facts and basic truths, which are a predicament to democratic dialogue. We need a certain set of facts to even have a proper discussion, to even be able to decide things or share a dialogue. And I would say we've had partisan press, we've had polarized public in the past, we've had civil war in Finland, we've had the US has been divided before, but there is something to this digital information environment which is qualitatively different, and therefore I would say that we should and need to care about our institutions and care about the institutions that provide the base for democracy, but also provide the base for communication and information. So also the universities, the press, and so on.
Thank you, Olli. And Iida Tikka is the YLE chief correspondent in the United States for YLE for many years, and a very famous podcaster. Season 2 of her American-themed podcast, Mureneva Maa, is out just as we speak. Welcome, Iida.
Thank you. Is this... Okay. I actually really want to continue on what Olli said, but on a more practical level, because the one thing, or like there are two things that I'm most worried about looking at US right now, and these are things that will safeguard freedom of speech, but if they are touched, we are in bigger fight than we already are. One is the erasure of statistics and facts and just, for example, government sites. And those are really important for the dialogue that Olli just mentioned. We have to have some base level, like even just an Excel that we all believe in, that these numbers on this Excel are correct. And right now what is happening in the Trump administration is that the government sites are being, there are reductions, there are some erasures. Oftentimes when you open a site, it may have now a banner saying that this site includes ideological information. And it reminds me a lot of my time in Moscow, where while I was there, the first banners started to appear on sites of, for example, media, where they said that this is a foreign agent. And now that's happening in US governmental sites that try to give information to the citizens. And then the other thing that I am really worried about, that I feel is the kind of very faithful question in US, is if federalism survives Trump's administration. Because as long as the federal system survives, there are always states that can uphold the idea that US is built on. However, right now what we see is an attack on democratic states and democratic cities. And if the Trump administration succeeds in kind of oppressing those states, we are again in bigger fight than we thought we are. But to end on a more abstract level, I'd say, there is one last thing that I'm a little tiny bit worried about, and it is weirdly enough American optimism, or maybe I would say the belief in American exceptionalism. When I lived in Russia, the reason why I decided to move away and go study somewhere else where optimism is more prevalent was that Russian apathy started with cynicism and pessimism, the idea of we can't change anything, so why try? In US, I've sometimes run into the idea of nothing will change, everything will be fine. And it is basically, I do believe that optimism is always good because it's a better place to start action from. However, too much optimism may also make a passive nation, because so I try to alarm sometimes my friends in US and be the Eastern European pessimist.
Thank you for that. Let's continue with the Finnish voices and come back to you, Kathleen, in the end of the round, so you can deliver your opening remarks as the keynote speaker. You had a very great and substantive speech yesterday. Thank you for giving the Declaration of Freedom of Speech here in Tampere 2025. We are grateful. But Laura Ahva, you are the brand new professor of journalism. Well, practically, rather brand new. So I would say, if I don't know, then I say, like Donald Trump would say, I think. I guess you're the journalism professor.
It's going to be huge.
Yes, so, the best journalism professor ever.
Ever. Thank
yes.
you for the introduction. This is a great starting point. Okay, first, great to be here to discuss, the pace of things. That is one of the things that worries me. It's so difficult to keep track on what is happening. And then also, what is happening, then there's going to be a lot of attention given to every small little detail that is going on, the commentary, so that the journalistic media wants to follow, wants to report, wants to cover, but is there a limit? When is it too much? Can we sometimes not report everything that is going on, and would that be beneficial sometimes? So that is one of my worries, that is there too much of coverage? And the other point I'm worried about is the kind of chilling effect. The idea that people internalize. I mean, the combination of the tech giants and the algorithmic environment and the massive data that there is available through social media actions, and then authoritarianism and the chilling effect it creates on all of us, even myself. I was experiencing it when I was planning a trip to conference, communication science conference in Denver, May. And I have been writing about issues such as diversity, the day issues in Finland, in the Finnish context. And I started to question whether I will be able to enter the country. And if I am starting to question that as a Finnish journalism scholar somewhere, what are the thoughts that are going on in the minds of the reporters working in the States, working elsewhere, trying to cover these issues? So the chilling effect, you start to limit yourself, self-censorship.
Thank you, Laura. And now we have our other American in the panel, American from China, professor of journalism in the Tsinghua School of Journalism, Tsinghua University in Beijing. But Rick Dunham is also a long-time veteran political reporter who has covered many presidents in the White House for US media, Hearst newspapers, the Business Week and others. Rick, we've been talking quite a bit yesterday and the day before, but what are you now most worried about?
Well, I'll say as someone who covered Washington for 29 years, always tried to be tough but fair. Someone who's taught journalism in China. Yes, you can teach journalism in China. Teaching students to write fact-based, tough, accurate stories. I'm alarmed to hear Donald Trump say things like writing a bad story about him, quote, that's really illegal, or criticizing him on TV. It's no longer free speech if you criticize him on TV. Or that if a comic tells a joke about him, it's not only incorrect, it's also illegal. Right? I mean, those kinds of things alarm me. But in a way, that's not what really worries me. Because, I mean, Iida talked about half of the things that worry me, but let me talk about the other half. I want to talk about the institutions of government. In the first Trump term, the institutions of government the press held against Trump. Congress held against Trump, even a lot of the Republican leadership. The courts definitely held against Trump. A lot of it is cracked in the first 8 months of the second term. Trump learned from his failures in his first term. The Supreme Court has buckled. The Supreme Court has this secret docket where they are giving Trump vast powers to fire people, to make these executive orders without a word. The Supreme Court is not explaining, it's not releasing any information, it's just allowing Trump to do things. That worries me. If he can use the court system to fulfill his wishes, and if he uses the prosecution powers of the Attorney General's office to start prosecuting people who make him angry, whether it's journalists, whether it's politicians who he has grievances against. Also, Congress. So far, I believe Congress has held. The Republicans in Congress have become lapdogs and have followed the Trump agenda. But Congress has not passed laws criminalizing speech yet. Right? Congress has not done the things that Viktor Orban or Putin have gotten through their rubber stamp legislatures. That worries me if that kind of thing would start happening, if Congress would start passing laws saying it's illegal to tell jokes about Trump, or the Democrats, I mean, that the groups who criticize Trump are terrorist organizations, things like that. And the media is in a shaky position. So far, I believe, as Kathleen told us yesterday, and as I have seen, the media has done superb reporting as a whole. Both strong, big news organizations, investigative reporting, and reporting on the impact of Trump policies, and smaller news organizations, both digital and some of the economically stressed news organizations. But Trump is coming right after, using both regulatory powers and his own personal lawsuits. Right? Even Jimmy Kimmel put back on television, and Trump just went ballistic after Jimmy Kimmel went back on TV. And as he said, he got $15 million from Disney, the owner of ABC, the last time he sued them. And he said, well, this one might be worth even more. Right? He's like the mafia don. He got protection money from ABC once, and now they made him mad again. He's going to go after them again. So using the court system. He's using the powers of the presidency. This is what worries me. If the institutions have held in a shaky way so far, but in the next 3 years, I worry that he's going to stress them even more and that some may buckle.
Rick Dunham, I've known you for almost 20 years, and I've never heard you as candid in your criticism of the power in the US. You always emphasized the fairer and used to be covering this side and that side, but now it seems that you are not balancing it, but you are worried.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Let me ask you here in the hall, how many of you have watched Jimmy Kimmel's show? Okay. Did you watch it before all this banning happened? Yes. Okay. Great. So you know what we are talking about. And here is Markku Mantila, editor-in-chief of the newspaper Ilkka Pohjalainen, and a long-time journalist in Finland as well, my colleague and friend, and who also worked for NATO concentrating on hybrid warfare and stuff like that, resilience in his life. Also worked as a communications chief for the government for a while. What is your take, Markku, on the topic?
Well, Matti, thanks. I have 2 takes on this, not 3 this time.
3 points is the norm.
3 points is not the norm today.
And this we learned from America, but our president made it an art form.
Yeah, well, exactly. My first take will go to behind the big water, the Atlantic, to the White House. And what really surprises me is that now there is a master of that White House, a guy who twists facts and looks like that he creates his own virtual reality, and he gets away with that. That's the really big surprise to me. I wonder, is there anyone, or are there forces to rise to oppose him, to say that you can't claim that you are settling peace between Azerbaijan and Albania, or that you still think that Finland is part of Russia? That was the case when he came first time to Finland in 2016. That's what he thought. So why he can do that? Why can he create his own fake reality? We have seen that happening in our eastern neighbor for decades and centuries, and looks like that Trump is applying the same tactics, same strategy in USA, and that is really, appalling, I would say. And well, that's not all. It won't take long that we see the same happening in Europe and in Finland. Well, to some extent that happens already, that we see politicians who do not believe in science or facts. They claim that vaccination is harmful for you. They figure out they fake figures of national economy, for example, or immigration or whatever, and again they get away with that, and that's why we need free and critical press, and I really hope that kind of press and media survives the storm. But let me take my second
Your
take.
third point.
No, my second. I still can do the math.
No, your second.
Well, in Finland, and I will make a very long story short. In short term, I think our biggest problem is the media economy, and I just refer to the Finnish news agency. We spoke about that last night, and we are in danger of losing our national news agency. And I believe, if my facts are correct, I think that if we lose our national news agency, it will be the second country in the world after New Zealand who doesn't have national news agency, and that's a national disgrace.
There's a saying in the world of news agencies that there is always a news agency in a country, either it's your own or it's somebody else's.
Exactly. That's right. You have to tell your own stories, or your stories are told by somebody else.
Okay, I think a lot of this is familiar to our participants. Let me just make 2 points from myself. First one is that what happens in the US does not stay in the US. It influences the world and it influences us, because we're part of the same hemisphere and part of the same cultural sphere, definitely here in Finland. I would call us even the 51st state, or is it the 52nd now? I don't know where Canada and Greenland stand, but or I do know, actually. They are standing very strong against whatever Trump said. And the other point is that actually, gathering from what you all just said, maybe the problem is not as much trying to censor the late night hosts, but it is the president blabbering too much and inflating the whole scene with so much speech that it is completely impossible to know what is true, what is the facts, and what is actually going on, because a lot of that is simply, if you excuse my language, it is bullshit. Too much bullshit flying around. But with this beautiful thought in mind, I would introduce you to our distinguished guest of honor, the former editor-in-chief of Associated Press, the largest global news agency, which is an American one. And when Kathleen Carroll was the editor-in-chief for 14 years, until actually to the beginning of Trump presidency, approximately, you didn't get to be an editor-in-chief under Trump. So the Associated Press was working in almost 200 countries, and it had hundreds and hundreds of journalists that Kathleen Carroll managed in her capacity. And also in the more than 150-year-old legacy of the news agency, she was the first woman to be in the top job. So you have been in many places and you've seen a lot. How worried are you, and what in your view is happening? I would give the floor to you for your opening remarks.
Oh, thank you, Matti. And you know, many smart things have been said here this morning, and I won't abuse your time by repeating any of them, but I think they're all very wise. I worry about two things. I know we're supposed to say three, but I only worry about two. One, I worry that citizens in places where there are freedoms, like Finland and the United States, take them for granted and don't know enough about them and don't take their responsibility for keeping those freedoms healthy seriously. And the institutions are only as strong as the people, and the people's ability and willingness to fight to keep those institutions true and strong. And so I think I've long worried that it's easy to be distracted. You know, in any country, your life gets busy, the kids have to go to school, the job is a pain, the commute is annoying, and those things begin to take the better part of your life. And it's not always very interesting to say, I have to fight for this right. But if you don't take some part of your life and devote it to keeping your freedoms strong, find one thing, whatever it is, and keep your freedom strong, they will be easier to erode, and it will be our fault. There's always somebody who's ready to take those freedoms. And the other thing that I want to talk about a little bit has to do with being at a university and with students and professors. And it's more optimistic. I think if you know what you stand for, if you learn to know what you stand for, you will be a better journalist, because you won't be distracted by the flow of cow pies or whatever. You know, do you bowl in Finland? Do you bowl? Yeah? No? Right? So you don't want to spend your career being a bowling pin, being knocked down by whatever ball is coming at you. You need to know what you stand for, what your mission is. Your mission is to tell the most accurate, factual stories to your audiences. And it's great to learn techniques about how to do that in universities, but the universities, and you may, I'm not criticizing, the universities also need to teach you how to know what your rights are. You will go to a meeting in a town, and the mayor will decide that they don't want you in the meeting, but you have the right to be there, and you need to understand what your rights are so that you can do your job. That is as much a part of your responsibility as knowing how to edit video or do SEO search. You know, and I'm going to elongate this story just briefly. When I started my career, I was at a newspaper in my hometown of Dallas, and I would write a story that had to be to the desk at 7 p.m. And no one but the editors would see it until it landed on a porch the next morning at 7 a.m. When I first took a job at the Associated Press, we sent stories over the teletype at 33 words a minute. Then we got to high speed. That was 9,600 words a minute. And then 27,000 words a minute. Over the course of the many decades, we won't say how many, that I've been doing this work, the delivery and the production has changed. The core values have not. And that's what you need to find in yourself and reinforce every day that you do your jobs. And that's what you want your professors to give you before you leave school.
I know you're not in the position to talk for the Associated Press anymore, but could you comment on what happened to the Associated Press with the White House press pool, because that is an example of what has been going on. So the journalists of the biggest news agency in the world have been thrown out of the pool of reporters that can ask questions.
Limited.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you see that? What has happened, and what is the meaning of something like this happening?
As you may know, the Associated Press has a style book that gives guidance on what to call things. And when President Trump decided that he wanted to rename the body of water known as the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America, the Associated Press said, well, actually it's an international body of water and you don't get to rename it. We'll still call it the Gulf of Mexico. And the Trump administration said, okay, we're going to throw you out of what is called the pool. It's a small group of reporters that are allowed into small places to represent all the reporters who cover the White House.
Such as the Oval Office?
The Oval Office, you know, you can still go to the briefing room, those things where you ask questions. And so the Associated Press sued the president and said that is a violation of our free speech rights. You're punishing us for our speech. And the court case is still going along, and it will go along for quite a while yet. There are two important things to remember about that. People who have power will use it, and you need to be prepared for that. And so the Associated Press was prepared to sue the president to uphold their rights to be in those small places. The president's action does not cover the AP's ability to cover the president. You know, you can still cover the White House even if you are not in the small room every time. Their access has been limited, but not banned. The White House has also limited the access of other news agencies, Bloomberg and Reuters, and banned from travel some other newspapers whom he didn't like. It's inconvenient, it's a pain in the butt sometimes, but it does not change your ability. You can't just roll over and go, okay, we're done. You know, you can still cover what the president is doing. And as I've said many times, and will say more, it's not just what he says. It's what the government is doing, and that's where your focus should be. And you can do that without being in the tiny little room.
Let's also mention the other side of the same coin, who has replaced the AP reporters in those rooms. I remember a person asking a question about the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's suit or lack of thereof. Who was this person, and who is now in those rooms? Rick, would you like to comment on this?
That person writes for a right-wing news outlet, but he's best known as the boyfriend of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is one of the right-wing members of Congress, who is known as the Jewish space laser lady, who believes that Jews send lasers into space to change the weather. And that's what climate change is all about.
Oh. Behind
you. Yeah.
Okay.
That's who it is. But he's in the Trump media ecosystem, and he asks questions that make Trump's enemies look bad or make Trump look good. That's his role there.
Markku.
Well, I failed to ask you, Rick, and Kathleen yesterday night this question that is bothering me and keeping me awake at nights. We see this process of deterioration of free speech and free media in US, and also the government is going after the academia and so forth. So I would like to hear your view on how do you think that it will end?
You know, I long ago realized that predicting the future was not one of my core skills. I don't know, but I believe in the health of the institutions, and I believe there are plenty of people who may not be getting as much attention, who are quietly filing the lawsuits. I mean, the opening attack is loud. The response is quiet and takes time, and it involves courts and strengthening the institutions and negotiating where that's possible. I believe it will. I believe the institutions will end up prevailing, but some, like universities, may be changed. And I think there's a discussion to be had about whether the methodology of insisting on changing universities may not be the best. But there probably is a reasonable conversation about whether change needed to happen at some universities.
I agree completely with Kathleen about changes needed to be made at universities, because I know a lot of liberal professors who were very unhappy with what was considered leftist cancel culture. When I was at the University of Pennsylvania a long time ago, we had a lot of controversial conservative speakers who had come from the Nixon administration, Watergate figures, or people who had been involved in the Vietnam War. The whole idea was that we wanted to hear from them, to learn more, hear from people that were uncomfortable. That was what college was about, to make you think and hear different perspectives. And in recent years, there were people like that were banned from college campuses because they made students feel uncomfortable, right? And the aftermath of the terrorist attacks in Israel and then the Israeli decimation of Gaza caused things to get much, much worse on American campuses. I want to flip that because I know well the impact of lack of free speech on college campuses. My grandfather, Rick Dunham, was a professor in America in the 1950s, and he was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee during the Red Scare, the anti-communist scare when the House Un-American Activities turned from Hollywood to academia. He was in what was known as the first round of Fifth Amendment communists. He refused to name names, and he was cited for contempt of Congress. He was fired from his job summarily. He was charged with a crime. He was acquitted because you're allowed not to cooperate with Congress. But he was blacklisted. He didn't get a job for 15 years. Colleges were afraid. Colleges were afraid. That's where we are right now. I think that colleges, especially state universities that respond to politicians, are afraid. And you're seeing it because professors are being fired and university presidents are being fired. And with the situation with my grandfather, it took years before things got, quote, back to normal. And he was not reinstated by his university until 1983, 30 years later.
Rehabilitated, we would say in a communist system that he was rehabilitated as a person. He was rehabilitated,
exactly. Yeah. He was rehabilitated 30 years later.
Now, Rick, when Charlie Kirk was murdered, Trump said that the blame is on the radical left, without any evidence to point at that yet. And there still probably isn't. So how many % of the US population today are considered radical left? And how many are radical left lunatics? Another moniker that we hear.
I really, as a journalist, I mean, I could answer it one way, because I mean, people who are, quote, radical left is it's hard to say. 2% less.
Who are actually radical left.
Yeah. But Trump,
in Trump's mind,
the way Trump defines it is anyone who's critical of him is radical left Democrat. He calls Liz Cheney, who was the daughter of Dick Cheney, a conservative Republican, he calls her radical left Democrat. I mean, it's just a term of art in Trump world.
So the habit of blaming the other side or some others out there for whatever happens, it's becoming much stronger and stronger all the time and polarizing the situation even more. And this is part of not all is happening through administrative orders or changing the laws or official ways, but it is also creating the culture and creating the atmosphere of hatred. Kathleen.
I think it's really important
Iida,
not to
about
overreact to
reporting
everything crazy that gets said anywhere.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really, really important not to go, oh my God, what has he said now? You know, because then whoever has said it and whatever crazy thing has said is controlling the narrative. And then you become part of the problem.
So you should not make news stories with headlines like, this is what Trump said, and then the quote.
That's not what I said. Okay. I said we shouldn't overreact.
Okay.
And you can cover what someone says within a context without flinging it out there and expecting people to go crazy every time. And there's a lot of cable talk shows that are on both sides that are just lobbing some crazy thing and then having everybody around the table react to it. It's not informative, it's not useful, and it just perpetuates the cycle.
So let's just calm down a little bit and
right.
not react to everything. It's because it's a limbo of the game of how low can you go every day. Exactly. Iida Tikka, you have recently been working in the United States as a reporter. You have the most fresh experience from us all, what it's like right now. Could you tell a little bit about the daily life of a Finnish reporter today, and what kind of challenges do you face now that you haven't before?
Can I just jump into the conversation quickly and comment?
Absolutely.
On Rick and Kathleen first, because and it slightly ties into that, because I do want to kind of comment on the cancel culture and then the court system a little, and then wrap it up back to the what will happen type of question. But about the cancel culture, and this is what I have seen working as a US correspondent, and I've done tons of stories where I travel with different people door knocking, and I've talked to politicians of both Republican and Democratic parties, some even third party, who try to convince voters to vote for them. And the thing that I've seen, like where Democrats didn't even realize how bad it got for them regarding kind of the culture of like, okay, let's shut this point down by just turning our backs to it, was that Democrats got really bad at convincing voters to vote for them, because they just decided that like I've been door knocking with Democrats, and they only knock on doors of Democratic voters. They don't anymore try to convince Republican voters, except for some Republican women. Meanwhile, the Republicans won the last election by convincing voters, by convincing new voters to vote, by convincing voters to vote for them, because they are more used to having arguments. And Democrats got bad at having arguments, and where that like kind of touches base with what freedom of speech is about. It's about the best argument, and it's about how that best argument should win in a fair discussion. Obviously, we can then talk tons about like if the discussion is fair, especially in times of algorithms and the tech billionaires being on one or the other side. And now we have seen them kind of like from both sides at one point. So that is the question. But then this is the top level that we're discussing about freedom of speech here, but the court system is obviously part of that. And while we are all following what is happening to Jimmy Kimmel, I feel that the thing about this past week that is really worrying me is that the Trump administration is discussing attacking the tax-exempt status of certain organizations that would then deeply impact their funding. And those are the organizations that are raising the court cases. If we see ACLU or NAACP, which are important civil rights organizations, lose their funding, we are looking again at a completely different issue than what we have now, because like we do still have these court cases that are still actually working, and there is still justice in US, but if there is no money to raise those court cases, that's a different issue. And that's not like, and that's right now when everyone's focused on the monologue of Jimmy Kimmel last night. No one is focused on like what will happen to the funding of these organizations. And that's kind of like where we are getting drowned by all types of comments. And then I do want to add a little tiny comment about the what will happen, and going back to my work as a US correspondent, I just recently did a second season of the podcast I've been doing, and this time I focused on the interaction of democracy and economy of US. And I went to the US stock exchange for one episode, and it really made me think so much about the interaction between media and the stock exchange, and how newspapers, which I actually learned in the University of Tampere, where I started studying 15 years ago. I remember this one history lesson I had there about like how print papers came to be to serve the stock market, right? And I do feel that there is an aspect where the idea of stock exchange needing neutral information still has been one of our saving graces in just kind of freedom of speech, even these times. But what worried me while I was at the New York Stock Exchange is how they view Trump as kind of also eating away the rules of the stock exchange. So it's like, it's technically not a freedom of speech issue, but it may impact us through that if there are no more rules to how you trade stock, you also lose the importance of facts in stock trading. I know that it's a little bit out there, like abstract thought, but like.
But some people have said that stock exchange is the only language, the only speech that actually has impact on Trump's thinking, that he can understand. So, for example, if he makes a foreign policy decision or puts out there huge tariffs in random countries randomly, the stock exchange reacts, and that might hinder or stop him, but that would no longer be the case if that what you're telling is true.
Well, you have to listen to my podcast to find out the answer.
I would very much recommend myself and everybody to go and listen to Iida's podcast, Mureneva maa. It's a crumbling country, but that sounds a little bit too terrible maybe, so they are also using the English name Casting Faults. Olli.
Yeah, I'd like to get back to these comments, and I would say this brings me to press, the idea of cancel culture and everything. It brings me to press also, because I think we all in all as a society in this digital space, especially, we need to educate or prep people to have dialogue and also confront uncomfortable ideas. And this brings us to the role of press in society, and also a role of our kind of startup with a membership-based model and a community-based model. And I believe that the press can bring you a lot of positive emotions, from kind of joy of discovery to why not also entertainment and all that. But it cannot just confirm your opinions, or it cannot just confirm your worldview. And I have to say that we also in Uusiutu, we also make our members miserable or disappointed, and they tell it very directly, because we have a comment section, or actually we have accomplished a mostly civilized comment section inside our platform, and we also do get criticism, and we need to get criticism to be better at our work. But sometimes the criticism comes from a point of view that we are telling something that feels uncomfortable, that doesn't feel right, although the facts are there or the world is that way. So I would say that this is very, very hard for us journalists in this day and age, especially when the social media feeds mostly just confirm. The TikTok For You page is very strong in its entertainment mode and kind of leaves you wanting for something more all the time, and that's what we're competing with. And I would like to ask our American participants about the role of US press in this question, because I feel like from Finnish perspective, because we have a high professionalism, we have a different kind of media system historically, but how do you feel that the US press has been able to live up to the expectation of also being uncomfortable with their audiences?
Such a great question, such a great topic, and I really appreciate your point of view that we need to hear criticism so that we can be better. You know, we all have to. we expect that of the people that we cover, and we need to be able to take it ourselves as well. I think most American news leaders agree with you 100%. The execution of that is often very challenging. I think the issue of how to deal with comments from your audiences is one that people have wrestled with, not always successfully. Some have shut comments down because they were being bombarded by partisans from the outside. But I agree that we need to find ways to hear from everyone and to have discussions, arguments, and not just shout at each other. I think cable television that is not news-based, but is opinion-based, is, I'd like for it to be called something else, because it isn't news. It's just reaction and reinforcement. And it's very popular on both sides, but it isn't news. And I prefer not to be lumped in with it, to be perfectly honest. They have their thing, God bless, but you know, it's not news coverage. They're not enlightening anybody. They're just gathering the choir and hugging each other. But the organizations that, large and small, very small organizations deal with this issue. I chair the board of a very tiny local digital news organization, and people get just as upset about the number of stop signs that have been installed as they do about who the president is. And you know, learning to moderate that and listen to people and incorporate them in your thinking is the way forward.
I think with the construction works going on all around Tampere and making my commute a real pain, I would love to have your local news outlet to cover these stop signs for me. Now, United States is on the spot 57 in the Reporters Without Borders Freedom Index. Finland is number 5, but I think for all of us the common question is also how to go forward with financing and to keep doing what we are doing. Another question is what you just talked about, was the polarization, about whether all the people have the same understanding about whatever is going on in the world. And I think in Finland, one of our strong points has always been to have a united view of the main news. Most of the people in Finland know the basic things that are happening in the world. But what I have noticed in my own line of work is that you cannot do any longer this kind of news stories where you take the news that happened yesterday and you continue today, and then you just refer to the news that everybody already knows and you build on it and you have a new scoop on it. But you can't really do it because there are no news that everybody knows about. So I think this part of our resilience may be crumbling as well, but not in the way that it is in the US, where people really are watching their own channels. But I would like to bring in one more speaker for a little while, because we have a voice from the other side of the world, but from the southern part of the world, from Colombia. Photographer Federico Rios has been our guest and listening to the discussion, and your pictures about the migrants and their journey through the treacherous paths of jungle in the Darien Gap, which is the starting point for the route when you try to go to the United States, and then you end up wherever you might end up. You might end up in the US, but it's not true for most people. Lots of things happen, and you can see it in Federico's pictures. But what I would like to ask you about this discussion, you have been listening to about the things we said about the institutions in America. From the Colombian perspective, how do you view the institutions in America, and is this surprising to you? Are your institutions stronger?
Surprisingly, surprisingly for me, I was thinking that Colombian institutions were very weak, and I always thought American institutions were very strong. I have to say that I'm very surprised on how things have changed during the last 8 months. and how this man who's now in power have learned from his own mistakes in the past and has found a way to jump over institutions and make them weak. And he's doing whatever he wants because he's like bending the institutions on his behalf. We have a complex situation in my own country, of course, but I'm also surprised in the opposite way and how strong Colombian institutions are, because we have had a president for 3 years that has tried strongly to bend the institutions on his behalf. He haven't succeeded on that. Of course, it's using a different method than Trump, but it's what I have seen, like comparing my country and the United States. But also when I'm listening to Donald Trump's speeches, I find that there's an obligation. I'm trying to find the correct words in English. Sorry. I think it's important not only to describe what he's doing, but also to challenge what he's saying, because he's openly lying to people. When he says migrants are coming from mental institutions, it's like, well, I have been there. I have been in the jungle documenting and working with migrants, and I can tell there's a huge variety of people. Huge variety. I have found homeless people walking the jungle, but also I have found doctors and lawyers, engineers, or people who doesn't have a bachelor degree or established job, but at least people who's willing to work hard in whatever it is, fast food or whatever, but not coming from mental institutions. And the fact that he's shutting down statistics departments in the United States to avoid accountability is really freaks me out. It's really scary. So I think at the end, in both countries or all countries, it's important for press to keep people and, of course, presidents accountable.
One more thing about the people in South America or in your home country, Colombia, or the people who are daring the Darien Gap and facing the challenges and dangers. What do they think about the United States? What is what they want to reach? And will they still think the same after hearing what we have been hearing?
I think it was you, or maybe Markku. No, maybe it was you who said yesterday, "Land of the free, home of the brave." That's what most of the people think about the United States. So all migrants who are willing to go there are heading there for first financial stability, and second that idea of freedom. I don't know if that stands now, but that's what it used to be. And for most of the migrants, 1 million migrants crossed the Darien Gap in the last 4 years. That's what they're reaching.
And thank you for covering all that and documenting the journey of those people. Thanks for your work. Now, I would like to have some Q&A from the audience, please, if you have prepared a question. Anyone? Now it is a great chance to ask whatever is on your mind, and Mr. Jari Väliveronen is handing the mic.
Hello, Rasmus Tihonen from Tampere University, journalist. Line. Sorry, my voice might be a bit down, but
we hear you loud and clear.
Very nice, very nice. I'm wondering, in Finnish news media, especially like websites, news media websites, there's almost universally there's a comment section that's moderated, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've noticed that in many US news media sites there's no comment section under like individual news, and in some media sites there's only in some articles there's the comment section, and often it seems like in those articles that people want to comment the most, maybe those are the ones with no comment section. And my question is, do you think it's only a research thing about moderation and how much it costs to moderate, or is there some kind of maybe like cultural difference related to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, given the platform compared to the US and Finland?
Okay. And you say that the most inflammatory stories are the ones that you cannot comment on. But I don't think all Finnish newspapers have this comment section activated anymore. It was more popular, but nowadays, Markku, what about your newspaper?
We reactivated it, let's say, about 1 year ago, because we wanted to have the traffic from Facebook to our own site.
And Olli, do you have this in Uusi Juttu?
Yeah, we have kind of our idea is that there's interactivity in every decision in digital sphere. Even a click is interactive. So our role as journalists is not one way with our audience, but it's always two ways. So we have tried to integrate all that interactivity inside our platform. So comment section is just one way of doing that.
And Iida, how does YLE work in this? Do your stories get comments under them?
So YLE has had one while I was still working there. YLE had a system of timing when an article, or we just started doing like you time when the article is open, because the journalist kind of needed to be there, I think, to converse, if I remember correctly. Why I don't remember this is that like there were very few cases that it was done to my articles, because first of all, I did work mostly on TV and audio.
Yes.
But then additionally, I had the time difference, so it was very rarely the case that my story would be published while I was awake.
But I suppose we can also broaden the question for you about all feedback that you get and how dramatic it is, and do you get harassing comments in general, not just in the online?
I really don't. I honestly, I don't get. I mainly get feedback that is very polite. Sometimes I discuss the topic with the people who have emailed me. Last year, I actually have just this week been emailing everyone who emailed me last year. So, because last year after the podcast was published, I got like about 300 emails.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I responded everyone. I had conversations with them, and now I have been in touch with them again.
And they were normal people, not trolls, or as Trump would say, whack job. Is that a word?
Normal people, and like I do have to say that I do believe that the idea of being able to discuss your articles, it's like it is very important for the part of the freedom of speech. And like if I get a comment about like, I oftentimes whenever writing about issues of structural racism, I will definitely be having certain conversations again and again with people who send me emails after that. So I'd say that's main. But it's kind of like, yes. I have viewed it part of my job. However, what I have not viewed as part of my job is being on Twitter. I don't see that there's no point on us partaking in conversations that happen on a tech platform that doesn't like again bring any traction, and
that is owned by Elon Musk.
Yeah, and those conversations are like kind of so obnoxious really easily that it doesn't make real sense.
You want to comment on the American practice?
To hear how the comment section is in the...
So I wouldn't presume to speak for the thousands of media outlets, but I spent a lot of time with a lot of them, and I do know that the issue of comments is not philosophical. It's technology and workflow, and that the more, especially for news organizations that were transitioning from their traditional formats, newsprint to digital, They were trying to maintain a certain amount of control over the comments, and they were overwhelmed, of course. Now there are better digital tools, there's smarter thinking about the way you want to engage your audiences, and I don't know of anybody that turned off comments for political reasons. They turned it off for workflow, or they were swamped by trolls. Now there are better tools where they can control some of that. So I think the presumption is that you want to be engaging with your audiences, and you just need to spend the money to get the tools that make that easier.
If I can add to that, AI has helped a lot. There are two things you do. You can flag comments, so you can temporarily hold off on them, so that you can have a content moderator check it out before it will be posted. And it is, as Kathleen said, a lot of media outlets were overwhelmed with the number, particularly because there's a lot of AI going into the commenters, so it's less political, less for political reasons than workflow and staff. But there is hate speech out there, and sometimes they have their own communities flag comments, and sometimes it's AI, whether it's cursing or something objectionable, that then will go to a human being to decide.
I hope this answers the question. Yes, Laura Ahva, journalism professor.
Would like to comment on the comment section thing, and also having Olli Seuri here with the Uusi Juttu doing kind of groundbreaking work in this kind of seeing moderating civilized and uncomfortable conversations as a journalistic virtue. I would love to see that kind of a task being included in what a good journalist could be. And I don't mean moderating in a technical or AI. Of course, AI can help, but that could be included as a journalistic job, and that could even be paid for.
I'm happy that you get this actually very sane feedback and post from real people, because my own experience writing about Russia and the Russia-Ukraine war, and also about Donald Trump, analytical pieces mainly, about half of the emails that I get are so suspicious that I do not answer them. I used to, when I was a young journalist, I had the idea that I'm going to answer everybody because it is part of free speech, but it doesn't make any sense to answer most of those. But then there is a very respectful category of emails that I get that is from people who consider it very important that someone is writing about foreign policy, about security issues, about defense of Finland, Europe, about dictators. I know, Iida, you went to journalism to prevent genocides from happening, and that was your goal. I'm pretty much the same. I would like to topple Putin, but well. But let's have a question from the audience now.
Thank you very much for your interesting ideas and perspectives, and also stories. I'm Kai Surettua, and I come from the Faculty of Education and Culture, and I am a teacher educator. And I would like to hear about your views on the future freedom of speech. So how does it look like? And if we think, for example, 20 years forward, what would you think what the children of that time will be, and how they should be taught about freedom of speech, and also what kind of journalism will be during that time? Thank you.
It is a great question and a very, very challenging one, but we have the best minds. So, Iida, you want to start off?
I've been the resident algorithm speaker during these couple of 2 days, so I'll jump in. First of all, thank you for the work you do. You do very important work in getting our youth on track with critical thinking skills that are needed for this. And I would like to say that you may know better what things are looking like dealing with young Finns. I do think that, like, if I consider what is going on, I know that there will be even smarter takes on this, but I am interested in how behind we are in understanding as news organizations how algorithms work and how they can restrict the freedom of speech. And I think that that is the main question for the young people. They are on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever, and none of us really know how it's decided, what they see or don't see. And that is a huge freedom of speech issue that we are just not really tackling really well. It's been slightly discussed by especially conservatives during Biden era, being worried about conservative voices being not presented on those platforms. But now that we see on TikTok in US, there's a lot of talk about how any videos of protests don't really spread. But it's really difficult to tell if that's true or not, because everybody's TikTok feed is singular thing. So you kind of can't know. And I feel that that's something that should be more discussed in universities and by news organizations.
It is such a big underlying issue that it's almost impossible to tackle. We talk about these daily threats to freedom of speech, but then we don't really see the invisible hand behind who is deciding what we can see and what we can't.
And one last point, the important thing about that is that that invisible hand is in Silicon Valley. It's in US. It's not like, how do we as European nations, like what is our comeback to not being able to in any way have a say of the freedom of speech issues of Finnish youth?
Yeah, it's not like before when you could call Markku Mantila or Rick Dunham and ask that what the heck are you publishing, and or why are you not publishing this piece of news? What is the reason behind this thinking? And then they would give you some answer. But now you cannot call the tech wizards in Silicon Valley and they don't have a phone number. I'm sorry?
But I want to have a slightly different perspective than Iida. It's beyond Silicon Valley. She's talked about TikTok, Douyin, the owners of TikTok. They're in Beijing. They're not in Silicon Valley. And there may be a reason that that protests don't show up well. They have the algorithm. They created this algorithm that they will license to the American owners of TikTok, allegedly under the Donald Trump deal with Xi Jinping. They are going to, the Chinese parent company will continue to own the algorithm that they will license to these American owners. It is quite possible that that algorithm does downplay protests, because in China you certainly wouldn't want to have protests showing up high on Douyin, of whether there are protests in China or around the world. So, but to circle back to what you were saying, I think that the key to free expression in 20 years is how are we getting information? I tell my students, I'm teaching you how to tell stories, and I'm teaching you how we communicate news today. Then I ask, how are you going to do it in 5 years? How are you going to tell a news story in 10 years? How are you going to do it in 20 years? 20 years ago, there wasn't a smartphone. There wasn't social media. And so if we're going to talk about freedom of speech, it's how are we going to communicate? How are you going to get information? Yeah, we can come up with this talk about how we're getting information today and the algorithms, which are very important. And it will be very important in the next decade. But we have no idea how we're going to be doing it. I don't think the phone is going to be how we're going to be getting information in the same way in 10 years. I think we will move on to a slightly different device. Right? We're not getting information on our smartphones in the same way we did 10 years ago. When I started teaching in Beijing, everyone wasn't looking at their phone every 3 minutes for the latest news update. Maybe a few of them were looking for text messages at that time. So I have no idea what's going to be happening. And that's to me, that's the big question if you're looking 10 or 20 years down the road. How are we going to get information? How are we going to be both social and in terms of news? But I do think the young people are more open to different points of view than older people. In America, and Iida, I mean, disagree if you will, I think a lot of the people who are saying, cut, censor, whatever, the Fox News generation is the older people. Mm-hmm. I mean, at least on the right. The young censor, the young cancel culture people are on the left. But I think a lot of the younger people are more willing to have more wide open, and I'm more optimistic about the future of wide open speech among young people in America than I am about among older people. But technology is what I can't predict.
Quick comment on that, because like one thing about the young people is that Charlie Kirk's videos were popular both on the left and the right, which to me is somewhat hopeful, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this question we come to the paradoxes of this communication technology revolution, because in one way it has definitely democratized the world. More people have a say, more people are included in the conversations, but at the same time it has concentrated power. The biggest platforms are bigger than any media company has ever been in the history. So I would say that we need both individual I would say technological media literacy, individual solutions. So we need to teach people how do they gather information, how do they interact with the information, and how does that also affect the quality and the content of the information they get. So there's always, we are active in a different way in the digital environment, and possibly in the, I don't know, the future environments we're going to be in. We're going to be active actors, but we have to teach people to be active. And the other question is a society level. And here I would say that for the freedom of speech, for freedom of expression, we need a fight for positive right for diverse information. Because the technological platforms are global, we need also a national political community to step up and take part in this like building the infrastructure, the ecosystem we live in. We cannot give it to only to the global platforms. We need to have our national solutions and our solutions like as a political community.
Laura Ahva, please.
Yes, I was referring back to how will journalism look like in 20 years and how this is related to freedom of speech. I think like the entire information environment will dramatically change, and I think it gets so complex and so straining on individuals to try to figure out what is fact, what is true, what is AI, what is, I mean, it's going to be like the information environment will get more complex, and hence I think we still will need professionals like journalists who do the work for us, because each and every one of us we can't survive as individuals if we have to go through all that. So I think there will be journalism in 20 years, but it may come in, I mean, it may come in, you know, the content starts to matter, because then AI and all the technologies will help us, you know, you can click, you know, okay, I want this piece of information as audio, I want this piece of information as visual information, I want this as text. So then I hope then we can focus on the content and actually carve out what is news and differentiate between news, journalism, media, and communication, and focus on the news.
I'm quite sure there will be media brands in 20 years from now, but I'm not sure if there will be media houses as such as, or newsrooms as we understand it in independent journalism. Because gaming, for example, in China is it's in the same platform, in the same app as journalism, news stories, commercial stories, your takeaway food, biking, and so on. So I'm not sure. Probably you are not sure either. Let's hear from the audience. One more question, please. And
Hi.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this conversation. My name is Emilian Kowalski, and I just started working as a professor of global studies here at Tampere University. So I had a more pessimistic question, which was slightly flippant, is like why Western media has left the global conversation on what is freedom of speech. But Olli gave me a different framing, which is slightly more positive. How can Western media be an active actor and participant in framing what is the global conversation of freedom of speech? You probably might disagree with my premise, but my context here is that for the past 25 years, I've worked in what used to be called the Asia Pacific. Now it's called the Indo-Pacific. And I remember anywhere in that region I used to go in a hotel, there used to be International Herald Tribune in the morning at breakfast to read. Now it's Global Times. Same with the TV channels. There used to be BBC, CNN, now is 4 or 5 CGTV network channels, and Russia Today. So the global conversation on what is freedom of speech as a consumer, for me, is being framed increasingly by non-Western media outlets. And the Western media outlets have left that space. So my question is, how can they re-enter, or why that has happened?
Thank you. And a core tip how to understand things from me is that when it says global in the name of the brand, then it's something from the Chinese government. Global Times or global whatever, it's always China. But how would you answer this question about the role of the global South and others than the Western media defining the conversation nowadays?
I would actually, I know this is cheap, but I would kind of blame the platforms and the digital transformation, because I would say that the way speech, the volume of speech grew in the decades of the social media becoming mainstream. Actually, what it did was it made a divide between the Western idea of freedom of speech. Before that, it was easier to defend freedom of speech, but we saw quite strongly how the US tradition, and which is market regulation, and the European tradition, which is more to regulation of speech through law, how they were divided, and how actually the West was not one thing, but West was and is two things. And we in Europe, we kind of think that we kind of regulate the social media for you Americans, because you have not been able to or willing to regulate these big platforms. And for us, it is sometimes hard. I've been in these kind of panel discussions with First Amendment fundamentalists, and it's very hard for us to start a conversation, because we are in Europe traditionally willing to limit speech, because we believe that limiting speech is also a way to bring people inside the discussion. So it's more about the right to have a participation in discussion, and not just, so I think from a global South perspective, this must be really confusing, because there is not just one freedom of speech idea. And I think this is good for our panel, but it really does complicate things. And I think this is a real divide. I was also in US for 6 months as a visiting scholar in Wilson Center, and I think in those months I got into more to the idea how the US historically and traditionally see freedom of speech, and I believe that actually is different to what we are accustomed, and also how we live freedom of speech in a Nordic country. So that's why I highlighted yesterday the negative freedom from and the positive freedom too.
And is there a West? I mean, you talk about the Western media, but is there a West, and who is part of that, and how is Hungary the same kind of West as Finland and the United States aligning with Russia or
But can I answer that in a micro way? Because I have been in China for the past 12 years, and I see what you're saying in Hong Kong. 12 years ago, you would have had many different channels. Now you're going to have the Chinese channels. There's not freedom of speech in the same way as there was 12 years ago in Hong Kong. Secondly, capitalism. BBC, CNN want money from the hotels or from wherever it is to show their news on the air. Chinese government gives the products. Global Times gives its newspapers to anyone who will put it in the lobby or on the airplane, because their goal is not economic, their goal is political. They have a different model, and so it's easier. So I just say it's a lot easier when your goal is not to make money, and so that's a big part. A third is When I first went to China and Americans would come to visit, in their hotel room they had the Chinese TV, but they also had CNN and BBC. Not anymore. Right? You're visiting China, you're just going to get the different CCTVs or the English language CGTN. So the Chinese government is limiting. But I end up saying, look at what Donald Trump has done to Voice of America. And
Radio Free Europe.
And Radio Free Europe. I mean, all the voices of, whether you call it free speech or independent information coming from the United States around the world, it's just pulling back. And so that's sort of micro. I'm not dealing with the big issues there, but I just see in several different cases, different reasons why the voices of the West are shrinking in the East.
And Trump is shooting the West or the American media across the world in the foot by pulling the financing away. But can I ask you, Rick, to answer a very big question very briefly? But we talked about Mika Hentunen and Kristiina Helenius's book, China's World, Kiinan maailma. And it's a question about whether China or the US is going to be #1 superpower in the world. And what does that mean? How do you see the things in Beijing? Is China or the US going to lead the world in the future?
Well, if you're talking economics, I still think the American economy is by far fundamentally stronger. So unless Donald Trump in the next 3 years destroys the American economy, which I think is very difficult. I think it's very difficult for any president to have that much impact on the economy. I mean, I think he has done damage to the American economy across the board and could well cause a recession, lead a recession in America and around the world, with especially the trade policy, but immigration and other things.
Is he making China stronger?
In the short run, he's making China stronger. He's making China stronger economically, and he's definitely making China stronger diplomatically. But I think the American economy is stronger fundamentally than the Chinese economy. China has major problems with debt, major problems that come from real estate and demographics. And it's not going to get better. China has a chance in the midterm, meaning 5 to 10 years, if America decouples from the world. And so that's the opportunity. If America becomes isolated and China has economic opportunities, particularly in Europe, not just in the developing world where it's really gaining, but if Trump alienates Europe so much and he has bigger impact than I expect, then there could be in the midterm. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Europe will either remain sort of independent as a third way. I think Europe is somewhat skeptical of China and China's economic intentions. And so I think China will continue to grow and grow in importance. But I think what Mika and Kristiina wrote, which is brilliant, is much more important in terms of geopolitical importance than pure economic dominance. But I think the questions that they raise are all questions that we should all be thinking of. The key questions looking forward, they've identified the key questions that will answer who is going to be the most important.
It may not be so nice to be living in China's world if we are critical of the world today, but it may be also terrifying. So let's see what happens. Tell you the truth, we are here thanks to the Tampere University education of journalism, and that is why I would like to turn to Laura, to you, and ask you the question, what does America mean to your students, to your education? What is the influence of whatever happens in America to your line of work here in Tampere University?
I think the most the influences come through reading the work of Anglo-American scholars mostly. So that is presently the influence.
So most of the studies and research in the field of journalism
that we refer to and that we follow
Western,
as
American,
journalism,
English.
American, British, it used to be perhaps German, but now more to the American British sides. That is the biggest influence and the biggest role, I would say. And then, of course, like referring to a couple of the points that were said here, in a way that influences and trends travel, and that the American ways of doing journalism or inventing new ways of doing it have been and will be modeled and tested also elsewhere, also in Finland. But the importance is try to remember, and again, coming back to these like different models of free speech in plural that we have in the world. So we cannot copy one form of doing things in journalism or any way, and just shifting it to the Finnish context, for instance, the way we teach our students, for instance. We need to be aware of the different journalistic cultures and different models of freedom of expression. So I think that is the way we need to place the United States in our curriculum, in a way, and in our teaching and in our research.
Great. Now, when we come towards the end of the panel, I would like all of us, all of you, to tackle the key question that we have: what does freedom mean? And also in the context of the United States. And Kathleen, I think this would be a question for you to compare the freedom of speech, free media in the US and the traditions there and how they are holding up. And then you know a lot about the European ways and other ways in the world. So what does it boil down to, what freedom means? I mean, what is the measurement of freedom of speech today in the US?
Well, freedom of speech in the United States has always been messy, and it always will be, because it calls for all speech with some very, 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 very narrow exceptions, And the European model, as I was saying, is different. And I think the tolerance for the United States has a greater tolerance for excess than many places in the world. Speech and guns are not quite the same thing, but they are analogous in that the American society has decided that it tolerates a lot of weapons to devastating effect, with devastating consequences. And speech does not have the same terrible consequences as guns, but as a society, as a country, we've decided that we should tolerate dreadful things people say in order for me to say what I want to say. And I think you're exactly right. Students and citizens everywhere should understand that there's not a copycat. It shouldn't be because this is what we decided 250 years ago, and keep reinforcing that works everywhere. But the underlying value of being able to express yourself, being able to cover people, being able to have journalism that asks questions, and to keep, if the goal is to have an informed citizenship so that they can participate in society, then you want to have the widest possible access to information and be able to ask questions and express yourself. And I don't think there's obviously the repression in countries that you all have described is not optimal, but I think there's a great latitude between the example set by the United States and how that works in other places.
Surely it's no Russia or China in the US, because there are differences. But,
or Vietnam or North Korea or
but then
Iran,
Trump is pulling pages out of the Stalinist playbook, for example, by calling journalists enemies of the people.
Well, he's been calling us that for 10 years and we're still here.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Do you think
they wear it on a T-shirt. I'm an enemy of the people.
Enemy of the people T-shirts, anybody. Do you see Trump era as something permanent or something that will go away?
All things change. life has changed. Yeah.
So American politics was always messy. It's gonna be, but still I don't understand when there was, for example, Munich Security Conference and J.D. Vance, the vice president, came in and lectured European leaders about freedom of speech and how we don't have it and how we should promote the right-wing party Alternative for Deutschland more, and that would be free speech. So there are always speakers who will use the gown, who will wear the gown of freedom of speech, but mean something different. And also Trump has been a big advocate for freedom of speech.
Wow.
And hating hate speech. But hate speech for him is the speech that he hates.
Well, Matti, I hope you'll take this in the right way, but history is full of white men who lecture everybody else about what they should do, and they aren't always right.
Okay. I suppose you're not naming I am one of them.
No.
So I don't take any offense. Markku.
Well, when it comes to freedom, what it means, if that is the question you asked.
That is the question.
And well, let me start by going back to my youth. That is long gone, obviously. And when I was a teen, I really loved US culture, music, movies, and whatever came from US. It was something big and so great. I still love Springsteen and among others. And but one of the biggest movies, I still love the movie, is All the President's Men. You know, starred by Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, who passed last week, I think. Yes, last week. And that is based on a true story on Watergate and Richard Nixon, about how two brave reporters made journalism that forced the president out of his office. That is, I call freedom. And I would like to see that happening again. Will there be well, the war between Azerbaijan and Albany didn't happen, and how it forced the president out of
the country in Europe.
Albany, yes, out of the office. That I call freedom. The force of free press to cover anything, dig out dirt, and make those who hold the power accountable.
I think this is one of the things we've always admired in America, is when you say to speak truth to power. It doesn't mean that you tell the power what it wants to hear, but you, vice versa, you tell what it doesn't want to hear. And you stand up and you say that, oh, the emperor has no clothes, or the road is blocked, why is it? Or, why are you lying, Mr. President? This is the American way, I think. What do you think, Olli?
I think we've circled around Donald Trump quite a bit for a reason, but I think the questions of freedom are kind of hard on his case. I think Matti used the word bullshit earlier, and I think Trump really fits the definition of Harry G. Frankfurt on bullshit. It's a speech where facts and truth don't matter. There might be facts there, but it doesn't really matter. He's sort of a champion trickster. And I would say that after almost 10 years, we still don't know how to confront that. And I would say there's some similarities to the way in an international stage we don't know how to confront Putin. And this brings me to speaking truth to power. So we have to recognize power better. And we have to also, as press, I think our idea is to help people understand the world and participate in the society as active citizens. So we need to come back to what Kathleen said, that we need to get people to understand their freedoms and their enforce their freedoms and abilities to participate and commune and communicate and receive information.
The thing about Russia is that those people who tried to speak truth to power there are dead, tortured and dead. We would remember Anna Politkovskaya or Alexei Navalny or people like that. And in the US, of course, the level of violence is different, and it's not as authoritarian. We're not there. definitely. So there always needs to be a difference made, and I shiver every time that someone says that US and Russia are just the same, or all superpowers, they are just the same. No, they're not. They're not.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that as international community, we are struggling to speak truth to Russia.
Yes, and to Trump, definitely.
And to Trump
we are very good in flattering Trump. But Iida, what do you think?
Yeah, I would like to return to my kind of point a little from yesterday of the land of the free and home of the brave question mark, and how that's important. And since I have worked both in Russia and US, and I view the freedom of speech from the angle of what I saw in Russia, what I saw in Russians, what I see in US, what I see in Americans. And I can't help but wonder, like when you said the thing about like having a T-shirt that says "Enemy of the People," I actually used to have a hoodie that said in Russian, spy of the regime of Britain, which my friends from RBK and Dost made for me, journalists from those two medias. All of them now live abroad. They don't live in Russia anymore. And it demanded huge bravery already then to be working for those media outlets. And I do still think that the freedom doesn't come without bravery. And I do think that this is also something we should think about in Finland. We tend to say that we have a very free press, but I do feel that we have a very cautious press as well. We should be pushing that border more. If there isn't like legal cases sometimes against media, I don't think we have like tried to push enough. So like I do think that you have to always accompany bravery with the freeze.
We haven't been talking that much about Finland today because we have the best experts on the US, but honestly in Finland news seem to be nobody's business, and the serious journalism is challenged in so many ways, and not the least from financing, lack of thereof, and the willingness of journalists and journalism leaders to cozy up to commercial forces and the bottom line of the company. And this is true. So there is not much really hardcore news journalism that I see at the moment, honestly. I see feature stories, I see well-written pieces, I see a lot about young people's lives, and this is what young people like to read in order not to get depressed by the news about the situation of the world. But how would we keep alive the information space where people actually know whether we are already in the Third World War or not? Or what are the criteria for that, for example? Even if it doesn't show in the top lists of the most clicked upon stories. And where are the leaders who are willing to stand up and say that journalism has value that cannot be measured by the euro, not in the immediate time, every day, every minute, every article. This is a serious question, I guess, in Finland and in every country as well. But we are quite cozy. We have a great freedom, but how do we use this freedom? Would anyone like to have a final thought, or should we just do a round of final thoughts about your takeaways from the discussions? And then I'm sure Kathleen already has to catch a flight and so on. So I feel a little bit emotional because we're coming to the closing of Tampere Freedom of Speech event. But on the other hand, we get to have lunch. So Rick.
Can I respond to this whole issue of the freedom? I'm moved by everything Federico has said, and I tie it with Iida, the land of the free, home of the brave, and everyone who came through Darien Gap. They're trying to go to the United States for freedom. They don't understand the concepts. I mean, I think 90% of them don't understand the concepts we're talking about of freedom of speech, freedom of press. But they do have that concept of freedom, Captain America. What we have to realize is I think most people in America, when they think of freedom, don't think of it in the exact same way that we are talking about. I mean, freedom is freedom to own guns. Freedom is freedom of assembly or freedom of religion.
To own your own boat.
There are freedoms, and freedom of speech is one. And people from China are really attracted, of my Chinese students, to the freedoms of America, but that doesn't necessarily mean what we are talking about here today. A lot of them are horrified at the disinformation and the lying, that it's legal to lie about all of these things in America that comes with free speech. So what I want to say is, it is our job to continually educate people. If we want freedom of speech as we see it to continue to be important in our countries and our societies, it is our job to continually explain to people, long-term residents and the newest immigrants, to make sure our society continues to value it. I mean, I am always an optimist, and I don't want to get caught in a rabbit hole about Donald Trump and his latest horrors. But I do think it's on us. I think it is our responsibilities, whether we are teaching, whether we are writing, to do more than just be good journalists. We also have to be educators through journalism as well as through education.
Thank you. So who would like to? Yes, Federico, you were talked about, so.
Thank you, Rick. I think that's important. Now I'll stand here just to see everybody's faces. Like one important thing I thought about freedom of speech and thinking about the United States and also learning a little bit about Finland. I think it's important to put things in perspective. And things in perspective are, do you know how many newspapers are in Venezuela?
No.
You don't know? Yes, there are no newspapers. There are no newspapers at all. That said, I think it's important to say that, to put things in perspective, you know? There used to be 2 or 3 small, very small media outlets that were surviving with money from USAID. There are none anymore. That to put things in perspective. So I think it's important to think about what Richard said, to think about what Catherine said, and it's like that optimistic side of life, and what are we going to do with that? Yes, because in places like Venezuela, there's no media at all. And
what happens when there is no media? Where do people get the news?
People just don't get the news. People read TikTok, that's it. And they think they are getting informed by TikTok. But I think it's super important, but I think it's part of a different discussion. I think it's artificial intelligence. I think like social media giants, which TikTok is the only one that is not American. I think freedom of speech is important to debate in the United States because all the social media giants and tech companies are inside the United States, but are providing for the world. But I think it's important to set that, like, the landscape of freedom of speech, understanding that even when we are debating the freedom of speech in the United States, if you look to places like Venezuela, when there are no media, things are becoming more and more complex. In Colombia, which we consider ourselves a democratic country, there are 2 national newspapers, and both are really bad. And that's the situation in most of Latin America. Africa is almost the same. So I think it's important to keep the debate up and the optimism, but to start from a good, somehow privileged position and understand the situation and understand that we can, I mean, in developed countries like this or the United States, keep the pace, or maybe if we look to the side, suddenly when we look front again, we're going to be in situations like Venezuela or Colombia.
Thanks, Federico, for reminding us about that and telling us something we did not know about your part of the world. Makes you think. We have been talking about news deserts and whether they appear in Finland and elsewhere in the US. It was 8,000 journalists have been fired or are out of their jobs during the last years. And Markku, you mentioned how many are in Finland out of jobs. How many was that?
Well, you know, when I prepared myself for this panel and yesterday's night speech, I went through some statistics, and well, they are about 2 years old now, but roughly we had 15 or 20 years ago about 3,300 journalists in the Finnish media houses, and now the number is about 1,000 less.
Laura, how do the young people today see journalism as a profession? Do the journalist students want to work as journalists or maybe elsewhere?
They would want to, they would love to work as journalists, but they are open to seeing other possibilities of making a living. This is how they are at the moment.
And is this how it is in the United States as well?
Oh, journalism classes are still very full, but they are taking many of those skills and doing something else with them. There are also lots of new media organizations sprouting up, and I'm very hopeful. Because I do have to go, if I could just wrap my own thoughts up, and then I'll scoot away. Journalists by profession are, we have a reputation quite rightly for being people who look at a glass and see that it's half empty. You know, we're looking for problems, we see what's missing, and we've spent a lot of time in these discussions looking at the empty part of the glass. But I would say the fact that we are having these conversations, and what a joy to spend time with so many really smart people who are thinking about it and educating the students of Finland and elsewhere. So I feel like I've spent the last period of time in the full half of the glass with all of you. And I'm really, really grateful, and what a privilege to be part of it. And I am sorry, but I'm going to just slide away, and I'm going to miss what everybody else has to say. I'll watch it later.
Kathleen Carroll, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And is there anything left to say? Do we end with this final thought from Kathleen? Markku?
I think it's the first one this year.
I thought you had three.
It's going to be a great year. Somebody in the audience asked about how we see the future of free speech, and I feel that it depends on one thing and one thing only. Do we see a renaissance of knowledge, facts, and information? Do we see a time when people really appreciate of those things and they are really pay for it? That is, I think, the most perhaps decisive factor.
Anyone else?
I need to add something. I know that this goes like off the rails at this point, but like since I said that the Finnish press is cautious, and just this like joke about 3 points just brought this again to my mind. And we have talked about this in DC when we still had our former president. I just really, and we have talked all these, we have talked so many days about Trump, but why aren't we talking about what Finland is like? What is our attitude towards Trump? What is our, like, there is very little criticism of Finnish foreign policy towards US. Okay. I did say in DC back in the day that why is our former president such a holy cow, so to say, that like where is the criticism? And I must say it again. This is like part of using the freedoms we have.
That is a good thought to end with, I think, because it's part of freedom of speech is how the political elites discuss and how Finnish presidency and Finnish foreign policy, of course, is part of the European tendency to try to have good relations with the US. Whoever is in charge, whatever they are doing, we'll always have good relations with them. So if we can't do business, then we'll play golf, and if we can't play golf, then we'll do something else, and it's all gonna be rosy, and we may sell these icebreakers, which may or may not exist. They do in Finland, but so yeah, it is a big question. And should we hold the power in Finland accountable for this, or should we just applaud that Finland is in the core of politics, in the spotlight, and in the White House, and Stubb is doing a great job? Unanimously, everyone agrees in Finland. So, do you think we should be more critical?
I will answer with a question, as one does. Do you think we criticized how much Finland was meeting with Putin after Crimea enough?
Or before Crimea?
No, after.
Also after.
After.
Yeah, after. No.
So, yeah, and that's my answer.
But in that we were in the same line with most of the West.
Is that like that?
Well, that's where you want to be. You want to be like everybody else in the West. So you see, this is a very problematic question, and this may well be the topic of our next discussion elsewhere somehow. So I would like to thank you all for coming. Thanks for being a part of this, and thanks for watching. Thank you, Tampere University Journalism Education, for making this happen, and thank you to our wonderful, beautiful panelists, the best panelists ever in the world. Thank you so much
for organizing.
And may I say this, and may God bless the United States of America.
Big and beautiful panel.